The smell reached the doorway before anyone stepped inside. It was faint at first, then it settled. Thick, unmistakable. One of the deputies paused. Another looked toward the staircase. The house was quiet. Too quiet for a home where a family of 5 was supposed to be living. Upstairs, a bedroom door stood slightly open. Inside, 4 bodies were found together. They were wrapped, placed close. The air was heavy, still. Time had passed, weeks, not days. Downstairs, in that same house, Anthony Todt was alive. This is what we know. Anthony Todt did not appear unusual to most people who met him. He was a licensed physical therapist from Connecticut. He ran his own practice. Patients trusted him. He had built a reputation over time, steady, professional, reliable. At home, he was a husband and a father. His wife, Megan Todt, had known him since high school. Their relationship stretched back years, built on familiarity and routine. Together they raised 3 children. Aleksander, 13 years old, Tyler, 11, Zoe, 4. From the outside, the family looked stable, structured and predictable. They lived a middle-class life. School events, work schedules, daily routines. Nothing about them suggested what would come next. But by 2019, pressure had started building beneath that surface. Anthony Todt was under federal investigation. Authorities believed his physical therapy business had been submitting fraudulent insurance claims. The details were complex, but the implications were simple. If proven, it meant financial penalties, criminal charges, and the collapse of his career. The investigation did not stay private. Legal notices came in. Questions followed. The pressure grew. At the same time, the family's financial situation began to weaken. There were reports of mounting debt, issues with housing, instability that wasn't visible to neighbours, but was very real inside the household. Then came a decision. Instead of staying in Connecticut, the family relocated. They moved to Celebration. It was a planned community, clean streets, organised neighbourhoods, known for its proximity to Walt Disney World. On the surface, it looked like a reset, a new place, a fresh start. But the timing raised questions later. Why move while under investigation? Why relocate the entire family during financial instability? Those answers would only come into focus much later. In December 2019, there were no visible signs of crisis. The children were still active. Just days before their deaths, Aleksander and Tyler performed in a school holiday concert. They stood on stage, participated, smiled. Photos from that time show them holding certificates, standing with other students. There was no visible fear, no indication of what was coming. For anyone watching from the outside, everything appeared normal. But inside the home, something had shifted. What exactly changed is difficult to define. There are no recordings of conversations, no direct timeline of emotional decline. What exists comes from later statements, evidence, and contradictions. At some point during that month, Anthony Todt's behaviour began to separate from what others expected. After his arrest, he would claim something unusual. He said he believed an apocalypse was coming, that the world was ending, that what he did was an act of protection. But at this stage in the timeline, those claims were not visible to anyone outside the home. There were no emergency reports, no interventions, no immediate warning signs documented in official records. The family continued moving through daily life, until, suddenly, they didn't. Late December. That's when the timeline begins to fracture. There is no single confirmed day for the murders. Investigators narrowed it down based on decomposition, communication gaps, and digital activity. But the exact sequence of hours remains incomplete. What is known comes from forensic evidence. Inside the home, substances were found. Benadryl, a common antihistamine, easily accessible, often used for allergies. But in high doses, it can cause drowsiness. Sedation. Investigators concluded that Anthony Todt used it on his wife and at least 2 of his children. The intention appeared clear: to reduce resistance, to control the environment. What happened next unfolded inside one room, the master bedroom. According to autopsy findings and investigative reports, Megan Todt was stabbed. The children, Aleksander and Tyler, showed signs consistent with suffocation or strangulation. Decomposition made exact causes difficult to determine with certainty. Zoe, the youngest, was also killed. Her condition made it harder for investigators to reconstruct precise details. But there was no ambiguity about one fact. All four were murdered. The family dog, Breezy, was also killed. Every living member of that household, except Anthony Todt, died inside that home, and they were not scattered. They were placed together in the same room, some wrapped in blankets, close contained. The scene suggested something controlled, not chaotic, not impulsive. It did not look like a struggle that spread across the house. It looked contained, intentional, and then everything stopped. No calls for help, no reports, no immediate discovery. The house went quiet. Days passed, then more days. Outside the home, life continued. Neighbours saw nothing unusual, no visible signs of disturbance, but people who knew the family started noticing something else: silence. Messages went unanswered. Calls were not returned. The family had effectively disappeared, but without leaving. At one point in late December, a welfare check was requested. Deputies went to the house. They knocked. They assessed the exterior, but they did not enter. There was nothing immediately visible to justify forced entry. No noise, no visible emergency. So they left. And inside the house, the truth remained hidden. As time moved into January, conditions inside the home changed. The bodies began to decompose. The environment shifted. Odours developed. The passage of time became physically evident. And yet, Anthony Todt remained inside, alive, moving through the same space, sleeping in the same environment, eating, existing, in a house where 4 bodies lay upstairs. Why he stayed becomes one of the central questions of the case. There was no attempt to flee, no effort to dispose of the bodies, no sign of panic-driven escape. Instead, there was stillness, routine, in an environment that no longer resembled normal life. That behaviour would later become one of the most disturbing aspects of the investigation, because it suggested awareness, time, and a decision to remain. By January 13th, 2020, the silence around the family had stretched too far. But the reason authorities returned to the house was not because of a missing persons case, it was something else entirely. A federal arrest warrant for healthcare fraud. Authorities were coming for Anthony Todt, not knowing what was waiting inside. And when they arrived at the house that day, something felt wrong immediately. But what they were about to find upstairs had already been there for weeks. The knock on the door was routine. Federal agents had been there for a reason that had nothing to do with missing persons or welfare concerns. They were there to serve an arrest warrant tied to healthcare fraud. Anthony Todt was expecting pressure from that direction, but what they encountered went beyond anything related to financial crime. The moment the door opened, something felt off. There was a smell, strong, immediate, impossible to ignore. Not subtle, not recent. It had been building. One of the officers later described it as overwhelming the moment they crossed into the house. It did not match a normal living environment. They stepped inside. Anthony Todt was there, alive. He did not attempt to run. He did not resist. But his behaviour raised questions almost immediately. He spoke calmly, too calmly considering the condition of the house. When asked about his family, he gave simple answers. His wife was upstairs, sleeping. The children were not home, possibly at a sleepover. The statements did not align with the smell. They did not align with the silence inside the house. Officers moved forward. Step by step, they approached the staircase. The odour intensified as they moved upward. At the top of the stairs, the air changed completely. Heavier, warmer, stagnant. A bedroom door stood partially open. Inside, the source of the smell became clear. All 4 bodies were in the master bedroom. Megan Todt, Aleksander, Tyler, Zoe. They were not scattered across the house, they were placed together. Some wrapped in blankets. The condition of the bodies showed clear signs of advanced decomposition. Time had passed, significantly. This was not recent. This had been there for weeks. The room itself showed no signs of forced entry. No evidence of an outside intruder. No sign that anyone had tried to escape. Everything pointed inward, towards someone inside the house. Anthony Todt was taken into custody that same day. January 13th, 2020. At first, the case appeared straightforward. A man, his family, all found dead in the same room. But what complicated everything was what came next. Because he started talking, and what he said did not match what investigators expected. Shortly after the discovery, Anthony Todt confessed. He admitted to killing his wife. He admitted to killing his 3 children. He admitted to killing the family dog. There was no ambiguity in that initial statement. But the explanation he gave immediately raised questions. He claimed he believed an apocalypse was coming, that the world was about to end, that what he did was an act of protection. He said he was saving his family from what was coming. Investigators documented the statement.
Anything you say may be used against you in court, do you understand?
Yes. If you're not entitled to talk to a lawyer before and during questioning,
You are entitled to talk to a lawyer before and during questioning, you understand?
yes.
Okay, if you cannot afford a lawyer, one will be provided before and during questioning without charge, do you understand?
Yes.
Okay. I know verbally you said yes. If I could be so kind, or if you could be so kind, could I get your...
But from the beginning, there were inconsistencies. There was no evidence of widespread panic, no communication suggesting he had tried to warn others, no preparation for an external catastrophe. The belief, if genuine, appeared isolated, contained entirely within his own account. At this point in the investigation, a deeper examination of the timeline began. Digital records, phone activity, financial data, movements before and after the estimated time of death. Each piece added structure to what had happened inside the house, and one detail stood out. After the murders, Anthony Todt did not leave. He stayed for weeks. During that time, the outside world continued trying to reach the family. Messages were sent, calls were made, none were answered. There was no communication from Megan, no contact from the children, no explanation. And yet, inside the house, Anthony Todt remained present. Investigators later confirmed he continued moving through the home during that period. He was not isolated to one room. He did not seal off the area. He lived in the same environment, with the bodies upstairs. That behaviour became a central focus of the case, because it suggested something deliberate. Time to act, time to leave, time to report. None of those things happened. At this point, the case had already drawn attention beyond local authorities. The combination of factors made it stand out. A father, a controlled crime scene, an extended period living with the victims, and a confession that introduced a belief in an impending apocalypse. But, as investigators continued, another layer began to emerge: the financial investigation. The original reason authorities had come to the house. Anthony Todt's legal situation had been deteriorating before the murders. Federal investigators believed his physical therapy business had been submitting fraudulent insurance claims over an extended period. The potential consequences were severe: criminal charges, financial penalties, loss of professional license, reputation damage. Records showed increasing pressure, mounting legal exposure, and financial strain that affected the household. The move, too, had not resolved those issues. If anything, it had delayed them, but not removed them. And by late 2019, those pressures were closing in. Right here, the case begins to split into 2 possible explanations. On one side, the confession, a claim driven by belief, an impending apocalypse, a father who said he was trying to protect his family. On the other side, the evidence, financial collapse, legal exposure, a timeline that shows preparation, control, and containment. 2 different narratives, both pointing to the same outcome, but not the same reason. The question became unavoidable: which one was true? There's a moment here where the details stop feeling distant. A family moving through ordinary life just weeks earlier. School events, daily routines, then silence. If someone is following this case closely, trying to understand how that shift happens, where the line is crossed, it becomes difficult to look away. And cases like this don't always stay visible. They fade. Details get reduced to headlines. That's part of the reason these timelines are laid out in full. So what actually happened isn't lost between versions. But the deeper investigators went into Anthony Todt's account, the less stable it began to look. Because his story didn't stay the same, not for long. After the initial confession, the explanation began to change. Details shifted, responsibility moved, and eventually, the version of events he presented would become something entirely different. Not a father acting alone, but something else. Something that redirected blame completely. Before that version surfaced, investigators focused on the physical evidence. autopsy reports, toxicology, the position of the bodies, the use of Benadryl. Each detail was analysed to reconstruct what happened inside that room, and those findings began to form a clearer picture, one that did not rely on belief or claims, but on what could be measured, what could be confirmed, because in the end the room told its own story. 4 bodies, placed together, no signs of outside entry, evidence of sedation, injuries consistent with intentional harm, and 1 person alive in the house for weeks. The investigation was moving toward a conclusion, but Anthony Todt wasn't finished speaking, and the version of events he would present next would contradict everything he had already admitted. By the time the case moved toward trial, the narrative had changed, not slightly, but completely. Anthony Todt no longer stood by his original confession. The man who had admitted to killing his entire family began presenting a different version of events, one that shifted responsibility away from him entirely.
After I saw everybody die, after I saw my wife die and saw my kids, most definitely. I wanted to be with them. That's the only thing I wanted to be. I didn't care by what means. I didn't care by what anything. I sliced my wrist. I took multiple doses of Benadryl. I tried to hang myself several times. I bought a pellet gun to shoot myself because I couldn't get a gun to, as you call it, eat a gun.
Did you ever try to poison yourself?
With Benadryl, yes. And also, I was just under recently of medical care, and I was given metformin for diabetes.
He now claimed that Megan Todt had killed the children. According to this account, she had been experiencing religious delusions. He said she believed in an approaching apocalypse, that she acted on that belief, that she killed their children, and then, he said, she took her own life. In this version, Anthony Todt described himself not as the perpetrator, but as someone who discovered what had happened, someone who panicked, someone who chose to take the blame. He claimed his original confession was false, that he confessed to protect her, even after she was dead. This new account immediately raised critical questions, because it did not align with the physical evidence. It did not match the timeline investigators had been building, and it introduced contradictions that would become central during the trial. Prosecutors focused on what could be verified, not statements, not shifting narratives, evidence. The autopsy findings showed multiple forms of injury. Megan Todt had been stabbed. The children showed signs consistent with suffocation or strangulation. There was evidence of sedation. Benadryl had been used. These were not random acts. They required time, preparation and control. The placement of the bodies also mattered. All 4 were found together, inside the same room, some wrapped in blankets. There were no signs of chaos extending beyond that space, no indication of multiple individuals acting independently across different parts of the house. The scene suggested one person maintaining control of the environment. Then there was the timeline. If Megan Todt had killed the children, as Anthony Todt claimed, investigators expected to see supporting evidence. Signs of her acting alone, digital records, messages, behavioural indicators leading up to the event. None were found. There were no documented communications suggesting she was planning harm, no evidence of her administering substances, no indication she had taken steps to carry out multiple killings. Another detail stood out: the use of Benadryl. Investigators concluded that at least some of the victims had been sedated before they were killed. That required intent, measured timing, and access. It also suggested an effort to reduce resistance, to maintain control. Again, this did not support the version of events Anthony Todt was now presenting. The contradictions continued. If Megan had carried out the killings, the sequence of injuries would need to align with that claim. But forensic analysis did not support that sequence. There was no clear evidence placing her as the one who acted first, or alone. Instead, the injuries across all victims pointed toward a single controlling force. One person moving through each stage, one person deciding the order. Then there was the period after the deaths. This became one of the most critical points in the entire case, because regardless of who committed the murders, one fact could not be ignored. Anthony Todt stayed in the house for weeks. If his account were true, it meant he had discovered his family dead. his children, his wife, all in one room, and then made a decision not to call for help, not to alert authorities, not to report what had happened. Instead, he remained. He lived in the house. He moved through the same space, day after day. As decomposition progressed, as the environment changed, as the smell intensified, that behaviour became difficult to reconcile with his version of events because it required acceptance, sustained acceptance, over time. Prosecutors returned to the financial situation, the investigation into healthcare fraud, the mounting legal pressure, the potential consequences. They argued that these factors provided a more grounded explanation. A motive tied to reality, financial collapse, exposure, the possibility of losing everything, reputation, freedom, control. And control was a recurring theme in the evidence. The use of sedation, the containment of the crime scene, the placement of the bodies, the lack of disruption beyond the master bedroom. Everything suggested a controlled environment, not a chaotic series of events. The defence, however, continued to push the alternate narrative. They argued that Megan Todt had been experiencing delusions, that she acted under those beliefs, and that Anthony Todt's actions afterward, remaining in the home, not reporting the deaths, were the result of psychological breakdown, fear, shock, an inability to process what had happened. They framed his confession as an act of protection, a decision made under emotional strain. But again, the evidence did not fully support that framing. Because the timeline did not show immediate confusion, followed by delayed action, it showed sustained behaviour, over days, then weeks, with no attempt to seek help, no attempt to distance himself from the scene, no attempt to notify anyone. As the trial progressed, each side presented its version. Two narratives, one rooted in the initial confession and physical evidence, the other built on a later claim that reassigned responsibility. The jury was left to evaluate both, to decide which version aligned with the facts. And at the centre of that decision was a simple question. What does the evidence show without interpretation? Not what was said, not what was claimed later, but what could be confirmed. The House Inn had already provided most of those answers. The condition of the bodies, the presence of sedation, the controlled environment, the absence of outside involvement, the extended period after the deaths. All of it pointed in one direction. But the final determination would not come from investigators. It would come from the courtroom. By April 2022, the case reached its conclusion. The jury had heard both versions. They had seen the evidence, they had reviewed the contradictions, and they had to decide which narrative held. Because once that decision was made, there would be no further revisions, no new explanations, only a final judgment on what happened inside that house. By April 2022, more than 2 years had passed since the bodies were found. The House Inn was no longer an active crime scene, but everything that had been documented inside it remained central to the case. The trial brought those details back into focus. Every piece of evidence was presented again. The condition of the bedroom, the placement of the bodies, the toxicology findings, the timeline, and the statements made by Anthony Todt, both the original confession and the version that followed. The prosecution built its case around consistency. They returned to the physical evidence repeatedly. They emphasised what could be measured and confirmed, the use of Benadryl, the injuries sustained by each victim, the absence of any signs pointing to an outside intruder. They highlighted the controlled nature of the scene. 1 room, 4 victims, positioned together, no indication of chaos spreading through the house. They also focused on behaviour after the murders. Not immediately after, but in the days that followed. Then the weeks. Anthony Todt remained in the home. He did not report the deaths. He did not contact authorities. He did not seek medical help or assistance. He continued living inside the same space. That detail carried weight, because it required repeated decisions. Not a single moment of panic, but a sustained pattern of inaction. The prosecution argued that this behaviour aligned with control, not confusion, not shock, but awareness. They connected this to the financial pressure he was facing, the healthcare fraud investigation, the legal consequences that were approaching, the instability that had been building over time. They presented it as a motive grounded in reality. The defence maintained a different position. They returned to the claim that Megan Todt had killed the children. They argued that she had been influenced by delusional beliefs about an impending apocalypse. They described Anthony Todt as someone who encountered the aftermath, someone who did not act rationally in the days that followed. They suggested his failure to report the deaths was the result of psychological collapse, not guilt, not responsibility, but an inability to process what had happened. The jury was asked to consider both explanations, but the decision would come down to alignment. Which version matched the evidence? Which version accounted for all the details? Not just parts of the story, but the entire sequence. During the trial, the inconsistencies in Anthony Todt's accounts were examined closely. His initial confession, his later retraction, the shift in blame. Each version was compared against the physical findings, against the timeline, against the behaviour documented after the murders. And as that comparison unfolded, one pattern became clear. The evidence remained stable. His explanations did not. At a certain point, the focus narrowed, not to every detail, but to the most critical ones. Who had control of the environment inside that house? Who had the opportunity to administer sedation? Who had the ability to carry out multiple killings in a contained space? And who remained in that space afterward? For weeks. There was no evidence placing Megan Todt in that role, no physical indicators, no documented actions, no sequence that supported her as the sole perpetrator. What existed instead was a reconstruction built from forensic findings. And that reconstruction pointed consistently in one direction. The jury deliberated. They reviewed the evidence, they examined the contradictions, they considered both narratives, and then they reached a decision. Anthony Todt was found guilty. 4 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of animal cruelty. The verdict rejected the alternate version of events. It rejected the claim that Megan Todt was responsible. It confirmed that Anthony Todt had carried out the killings himself. The sentencing followed. Life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. An additional sentence for the killing of the family dog. There would be no release, no reduced term, no future outside the prison system. The case, in legal terms, was closed, but the details remained difficult to reconcile. A licensed healthcare professional, a father of 3, a family that from the outside appeared stable, all ending inside one room. There are elements of this case that continue to stand out. The controlled nature of the crime, the use of sedation, the containment of the victims in a single space, and the period that followed. Weeks spent inside the same house, with no attempt to report what had happened. There is also the question of motive. Financial pressure is documented, legal exposure is clear, but the internal reasoning behind the decision remains less defined. The claim of an apocalypse was presented, then withdrawn, then replaced with another explanation. None of those versions fully aligned with the evidence. What remains is the record, what was found, what was confirmed, what was decided in court, and that record establishes a sequence. A father who killed his wife and children, who remained in the house afterward, and who later attempted to change the story. Cases like this do not resolve cleanly, even after a verdict, because the outcome explains what happened, but not always why. And in this case, the why never settled into a single, consistent answer. Some details fade over time, others don't. The image of that room, 4 bodies placed together, a house that remained quiet for weeks, and one person inside saying nothing. There are many cases that pass through the system. Some are reduced to headlines. Others hold attention longer. This one remains studied because of what happened after the crime, the stillness, the delay, the absence of action, and in the end the timeline is fixed. Late December 2019, 4 lives taken inside a home. January 13th, 2020, the discovery. April 2022, the verdict. Everything else, statements, claims, explanations, sits around those points, but doesn't change them. The house is no longer part of an active investigation. The legal process has concluded, but the facts remain in record, unchanged and final.